Here we have a car's starter motor. This here is the old one that I've taken out. It needs to be replaced with a new one, so before I do that, I thought I'd take a quick video of this just to quickly show how a starter motor looks like. All starter motors for all cars are made specifically for each type of car, even though this is the original starter motor. The one that I'm replacing it with, although it's an aftermarket one, it's made specifically for this type of model car. The only difference is, I've noticed with the new one, is that it's slightly more powerful, but it's made in a different country. So here we have the new starter motor. I always like to compare the old part with the new part just to make sure it's a perfect match. And with this one it'll be easier to explain a few things. Now, the way a starter motor works, it's basically a DC motor that runs on 12 volts, and all starters, at least car starters, have right next to it a starter solenoid. So what this does is, when you turn the ignition key, power goes through because you have a connection here and a connection here coming from the battery. So you turn the ignition key, power comes and activates the solenoid here, which in turn, what this solenoid does is it pushes out a pin that engages this little gear over here. And what this gear does is that it comes out. That's what the solenoid does. It engages that gear to come out, and then with the power flowing now through the starter motor, that's what turns the engine. So with the starter motor spinning and this small gear here having popped out, it's engaging with your flywheel, and that flywheel is then in turn being turned by the starter motor, which is also turning the engine via the flywheel. So the initial startup, when you're hearing the starter motor running, it's the sound of the starter motor turning the flywheel, because that little gear has come out thanks to the solenoid here. So once the car is running, the engine is running, that little gear then pops back in. That's when you have disengaged the ignition with your key. So that little gear pops back in its little house there, so it's not interfering with the spinning flywheel, which is now being turned by the engine itself. So there you have it. Old starter, new starter.